Hello and welcome to another one of EMG's panel discussions inspired by South by Southwest. I'm Isabel Barreto, and here with me today I have Bob and Elliot and Margie and Brenda. So thank you guys for being here today. Today we're going to be talking about a panel that I went to at South by Southwest called Stop Listening to Your Customers. And in that panel were Mark Trammell from Twitter and Nate Bolt. And he owns a user experience company called Bolt Enterprises. And the premise of the panel was to talk about how to get to prototyping as fast as possible when you're working with a product or project, to shorten the survey and discovery process. And their point was in making some short assumptions, getting initial information, making some assumptions, and going straight to prototyping and starting to test this on users, that you get much further along and you find out quicker if this project or product is going to be successful or not. So there were a couple of questions that I had within this subject, which is what are some of risks that you guys find associated with this? I know it's kind of, in the panel when we were there, people were just kind of raising their eyebrows and they were like, oh my gosh, you know, how do I skip a very important part of a project such as discovery? And so what are some, I want to hear from you guys, some risks that you find associated with this, or do you agree, do you not agree?
Well, I'm going to go first, and I'm going to say that I think generally speaking is one of the best approaches you can have to any type of a software development environment. One of the risks is that too much involvement of the client and too much listening to the client, you can actually deviate from your original requirement and your original design. But you had in mind A, by listening too much and getting diverted to that. One of the risks is that you intended to produce A, you end up producing B. And that's one of the risks that I see, get too much involvement.
Too much information, too much involvement.
You're not saying necessarily skipping the discovery process altogether. It's more of a condensed version of it too.
Right.
I think one of the risks that you need to make sure that you don't have to run into is making sure that you know what the business goals are outright, and making sure that every iteration that you work on actually lives up to those business goals. And I think one of the challenges that I've always been faced with has been what kind of contract you set up with a client so that you can actually be enabled to do something like this. You know, agencies either get AOR retainer deals or they get very fixed bid. And so it almost goes against the notion of early and often testing if you have to put a limit on iterations.
Right.
So that's been the one thing that I've constantly run into. So somewhat of that planning needs to be in place so that you're not just going in blind. So it's a perfect balance that you're looking for in order to make it effective for the client.
Yeah, one of their main examples that they had was this new product within Twitter that they were launching, and they did it with 4 people. They tested in one day, and they spent 60 hours, getting this done. And the way that they did it, they had several test subjects doing the testing from the comfort of their own home, and they were able to watch this user on a screen while you had developers and QA and a moderator within the room. And this allowed them to see exactly what the behaviors were of that person, and without taking them from the comfort of their own home. And they saved they used, I think, Silverback was to do this. Their point was to just get through this phase as quick as possible. But yeah, I think that knowing your business goals, obviously you're able to stay on that track, and having somebody manage that as well, I think is...
I think the greater risk is not doing anything at all. And I think it's not really about how quick you can get to the testing. It's what combination of tests is right for the actual client and for the actual project. So I understand what they mean by getting to test quicker, but it's also the quality of those tests and the different combination of those tests. And I think the really great thing about usability testing today is that it's evolved so much even in the last 2 or 3 years, where about 5 years ago, with planning and budgeting, you really did have to think of that and we still think about it now, but you might have had to spend like $20,000 or $30,000 for some sort of prototype development because you needed the labs, because you needed 5 subjects, because you needed to pay for them, because you needed the snacks, because you need to basically prepare for this whole event. But now we have an onslaught of so many remote usability testing services where you can test information architecture, you can test the stickiness of a message, you can test down to the click. Because of that, it's really opened up the opportunity for us to do quick and dirty usability testing, whereas before it was a lot more expensive and the cost to entry was a lot greater. Now, it just doesn't make any sense not to do it with all the tools. You can basically test for $50 using a service like Silverback. And you can add on 2 or 3 more tools to basically kind of triangulate these behaviors. So I think the greater risk is not even considering doing any usability testing. I feel like it's part of the DNA of the project now. Or it always has been. I think it just really just opens up the window for us to do more of these types of usability testing. So the question becomes whether we have a smaller project or a larger project, what combination of tools do we have for us today in order to do something that's as quick as paper testing, card sorting, or maybe as grand as the fully developed user testing with maybe some remote usability. So again, the greater risk is not doing anything. And it's not really about getting to testing fast, but it's about getting there correctly.
And what do you feel is, do you feel like clients in general are focused on user testing? Are they wanting to, or do they kind of want to skip that part and get to the end? Because I know sometimes clients are really, they want to see the finished product so fast, because in their minds a lot of times it's all about the timeline.
Sure.
So what, in your experience, what has been some of your obstacles in explaining that to the client?
I think it's awareness. I think that, and that's why they hire us, because we're the experts in this particular area. So in my experience, and you guys pop in as well, what I've seen is there isn't necessarily an appreciation for usability because it's not necessarily top of mind, or the different types of methods that we could use. And it really just depends on where they are in their business. So we worked with a client before who basically, it took them 2 years to even get to a redesign of their website. So absolutely, usability testing was something that we needed to do because they were putting such a large investment in rebuilding and re-innovating their brand online. So working with that type of client, I feel like they're definitely going to be thinking about it. But sometimes you have to do a little bit of work and research and really kind of understand the types of, and not just usability testing, but what types of research practices really kind of make sense for this particular client. And they don't care about usability necessarily, but they care about the right approaches, period, to move their business forward. And I think it's just really up to us to basically put it on the table and say, these are absolutely the things that you need to do for your business. Some of it might be some other discovery methods, and some of it might be usability. And so as long as we can bring that to the table, usually there isn't as much of an obstacle in needing to do what's right for the project.
Well, and at the end of the project, they want to make sure that their return on investment is good. And I think that, as the experts being hired for this, we would be doing them a disservice. So none of us at EMG would ever recommend the easy way out,
Right.
And that's part of what we get paid to do, is to kind of diagnose and tell them what needs to be done in order to do this the right way. It doesn't mean that there's not, if you heard anything that Brenda's said, is there's lots of different ways of getting there, a lot of different options, what to heavy up on, what to pull back on. But yeah, sometimes you just need to deliver the hard
Yeah.
facts. And I do think that clients are becoming a lot more, not just raw data-driven analytics focused people, but they do want to see more of that user experience, what that's looking like, as we sort of progress and become more sophisticated with the tool sets that were being offered. So
I think there's a benefit too that we were touching on earlier in preparation, or kind of we were talking before the camera started rolling about what happens when you involve your users in the test and literally the people you hope to be using it. Where can you use the testing process to build advocates, whether you're building a product for the market and you're being very selective, not just around the demographics. I want to choose the demographics that are likely to be using this, but actually people I think might influence the propagation of this product.
Yeah.
I want them to feel vested in its development so that when it does go to market, and say, hey, I was a part of testing that and making it what it is today. But you can also do that if you're working with an agent, an agency and a client. For instance, we're working with a school to roll out a product, which we are right now.
Absolutely.
Taking it to the students first, that are probably going to see it in the end, and then when they see it, they're going to be excited, or they're already talking about it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a real advantage beyond just product development, but product propagation as well.
Absolutely, and in the title of the panel that I went to, Stop Listening to Your Customers, I think that was a great eye catcher, because we're so focused on listening, but they were more talking about let's watch their behavior and let's watch them interact with what the end product is, because eventually that's what people are going to be doing. Well, thank you guys so much. I think that's all we have time for. You can check out more of our discussions at visitemg.com.